Hey, good afternoon, friends. Glad to see everybody here, and thank you for joining us in our third webinar in our Reimagine series. There are already scheduled the next 2 weeks. I'll tell you more about that. We are working on a grand finale week with a special speaker that I will tell you about more. Hopefully that works. I have planned for you guys today just to talk about your financial picture. And anybody that knows me and hangs around me knows that that's my happiest day ever, to talk about what's going on in the world financially, what you guys look like today, and what we expect to see in the short run, and then possible changes for the long run. And I'm going to give you some very concrete strategies today for small things you can do right now as families are coming back or you're reopening that will make a huge difference in the long run. So my suggestion for you guys is to listen to what I have to say. Please feel free to put your chat questions out there. Carrie Pergerson from our team is monitoring and can answer most of our questions. Also, please put other questions in the Q&A box for us to answer at the end, and we'll save some time for that. And know that everyone's situation is different right now. Our team at Hinge has the most respect for what you guys are going through, what decisions you've had to make, how you're implementing, and how you're preparing for the future. We recognize that individual decisions are critical. There is not one answer right now. And I will say some things that will give some options. Take the ones that work for you, apply them to your situation. You might be opened, you might be closed. I have no judgment there whatsoever. It was a very personal decision. Some places were mandated to close, others made the choice to close. Some people closed and are now reopened. Some people stayed opened and are ramping up pretty quickly. And just last week, we're hearing reports of schools that stayed open, gaining enrollments from other schools that did not stay open, and also picking up their families pretty quickly. I would say there's some schools up to about 60% recovery of where they were in February, maybe some pushing 70. So that's great news. And again, geography makes a difference. Your particular situation makes a difference, and your parent base makes a difference. So find one or two things in these suggestions. Consider making changes now that will impact you greatly in the next, well, forever. So let's get going a bit. But also, sorry, one more housekeeping thing. We will be sending these slides out to you proactively in an email for all registered participants. We will also send you a training certificate. So expect that to come by tomorrow. This live webinar will be posted on our website, hingebrokers.com, by tomorrow, along with all of the webinars that we've ever done, frankly, which is about 5 years of content. Since March, we focused on immediate strategies during March, and then April into May, we're working on our Reimagine series. We want you to use this time as an opportunity to be bigger and better and stronger than ever before. We're finding that people that use the very strong time we were in last year, 2018-19, to preserve cash, to improve their companies, to implement new marketing strategies, to work with staff better, will be stronger and better in the future. And I truly believe that. I think that our industry will have a new standing in the community. We're already hearing things about the early education community we've never heard before, how important you guys are, how essential you are. We expect there to be more funding available for you guys, in addition to what most people have tapped into with the PPP program. There are state initiatives that are paying supplements to staff as essential workers. There are states that are giving grants to be spent for whatever. There are some lobbying efforts on the national front that are pushing for a specific carve out for childcare, and we're following that pretty closely and participating in information to help support that. So we hope there's more help along the way, but we want you to be prepared, not just to get through what's going on right now. We want to help you navigate that, but we want to help you set yourself up for a stronger financial future. So here's what we want to talk about today. I have a couple of things that are happening at Hinge, opportunities to tell you about first. We want to talk about just a little bit, if you haven't been exposed to it with the Hinge team, what we believe the financially healthy school looks like in normal times. And then we want to talk about strategies for change right now and for the future. Strategies that will improve your revenue or reduce your expenses. So we got one way to go, right? We had a very tight financial picture anyway. We're a low margin business. We have a lot of expenses, and we have to balance some things out right now, and we have to get prepared for what we might look like in the future. So that's what we have prepared. Like I said, this is our reimagining series. Next week, we have Mike Pepper from our team discussing real estate strategies. I will touch on that briefly today as one of the 5 most important things that you can do right now. Mike will dig deeper into it next week. So if you own your own real estate or you lease your real estate, Mike has some great strategies and you'll want to hear that. We are so excited about our annual Thrive event. We have 2 events annually. We do a Thrive event in September typically, and our Shift conference, our 3-day conference, in February. We have made the decision to get you our September Thrive event, which was scheduled for Portland, Oregon, and we're sorry we won't be there because we have some cool things planned. However, we want to get you that content sooner and safer. So we're moving the date up and we're doing it via the web. What you will get is a one-on-one coaching session in advance with one of our team members to help you look at your particular situation and make some strategies so you know what content to pay the most attention to on our live event day. We want you really to focus on 2 or 3 things and not the 50 things we will give you tips about. We will ask you some questions about your situation. You will have the coaching event. We will be live on Friday, August 7th. We will limit to 100 participants like we always do. This is our 4th year. We always sell out, and we would love to have you join us. You will get the content live from our team. You will have the ability to ask questions live. We will split you into breakout groups at lunch, and you will get a case study to work through with your group. And we will wrap up the day with your individual questions. So we're really excited about that. We bumped up the date to August 7th because we want you to have that content before school starts and to really meet you where you are at that time. As we're developing content, we are doing it pretty much last minute because the world is changing so quickly, as you guys know. So registration opens this Friday. Consider joining us. If you don't make the live event or we do sell out, we will make the recording available for a lesser fee. So think about joining us. We'd love to have you there. In addition, we're excited that we partnered with Childcare Information Exchange magazine this year. We produced a video series with them. It's free. It's got a fabulous lineup of speakers, including some of our Hinge team. It started last week. There's a video released every Wednesday. Tomorrow is a video about using technology in your curriculum and with your staff. And so from surviving to thriving, creating a way forward in challenging times. So look for that. I think you'll enjoy the very wide variety of people who contributed and the different types of companies that put content together. It's very good. So let's jump into the financial picture of where we are right now, what we expect the future to look like. First of all, I want to, if you've heard this from me before, sorry, but it's, I think it's relevant to where we're going to go. We have, I realized today, I think that it's been about 30 years since I first put together our Thrive financial model. We call our financial model My Silent Business Partner. And My Silent Business Partner allows you to put in your school's license capacity and your average tuition rate, and it will populate and show you what the average financially healthy school in the United States spends in each expense category. And here's where it came from. 30 years ago, I was operating a company that had 150 schools, and it's where I got my training ground. And I'm an accountant by trade, so it's my happiest day ever when there are numbers involved and I get to talk to you guys about your numbers. My company was part of a consortium of other companies that got together on a regular basis and shared information, real down and dirty information, not just classroom management and what are we doing about curriculum. We shared what insurance providers do you use and what are your benefits for your staff. And one quarter, the topic was bring your financial statements and let's do some comparisons. So the bean counter and me got so excited that day, and I went back to my office and spread these 10 or 12 companies' financial statements out across the conference table. And what I noticed was, because these were they were good performing companies. I'm not sure I would have called any of them great. Maybe some of them were great, but they were all performers. And what I noticed was, except for one outlier, which was a company that spent less on their real estate because the real estate was older, consistently these companies spent the same percent in each category. So predictability is very important for an accountant when we're creating budgets and counseling people. So what I did was go back and create, here's a hard copy of it. I'm going to show it to you on the screen in just a minute and explain on my color code. But I created a business model that said the average school in the United States spends this in this category. So that was 30 years ago. And up until now, I have only made two very minor tweaks. About 10 years ago, and let me tell you where the continuing information comes from. Our work at Hinge Brokers, of course, is helping people sell their business or buy a business or sell their real estate or buy real estate. So we're privy to a lot of companies' financial statements. They're confidential. We sign confidentiality. They never get shared. But we know and see most of the national groups' financial statements, large regionals, smaller multi-site companies, single-site companies, family-owned companies, small buildings, big buildings. And I'm constantly reviewing that for changes in the way people spend. What I noticed about 10 years ago is that people began to spend more money on staff benefits as the labor market got tighter, and they began to spend less money on marketing because social media marketing so much less expensive than the billboards and the direct mail and those crazy things we used to do. They almost balanced each other out, though, and the overall picture looked about the same. More recently, let's say in the last 2 years, I was monitoring staff cost for the difficulty in hiring. It's seen that people were having to spend 5 to 10% more of their revenue on staff costs, but I had not seen it normalized to the point that I made a change in the model. Today, I think that the model's completely flipped. So let me show you some of the things I'm thinking. So here's the model, and it is actually expanded, but I couldn't fit the whole thing on the screen. So what you will see, if you were to get this and you were to input into the top where you see in yellow your license capacity and your tuition rate, you can see that this school's capacity is 140 and their rate is 175. Then there are 5 columns actually: 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%, and 90% occupied. Because as you know, you can't possibly spend the same percent for staff at 90% that you can at 50%. It costs you more when you're less full. You got to have those people anyway. At 90%, you're probably maximizing your ratios in your classroom, so it gets more cost effective to operate. So it's expanded. All of these categories that you see that I have highlighted in blue or orange, I'm monitoring right now all of these categories that have the ability, at least in the short run and possibly in the long run, to change. If they're highlighted blue, they're probably going to be more expensive. If they're highlighted orange, they have the potential to be less expensive. But I think with some tweaks in our modeling and our policies, we can start to fill up again and become financially healthy again. It's my opinion that some things might be more expensive forever. For instance, cleaning. We may spend more money on personnel and products and safety items, possibly maintenance in our buildings, possibly new filtering systems or disinfecting systems. We will probably, for a very long time, if not forever, allocate more resources there. So how are we going to balance that? How are we going to do that? What are we going to do in the short run? What are we going to do in the long run? So let's break these down. Okay, so you saw my model, and here's kind of how it looks. We believe that the financially healthy school is about 70 to 90% of their license capacity. Some people keep their capacity a little bit lower than license capacity, but we do like to use that as a marker because you could make a decision, but you could put your full license capacity into a building. So we model off of that. We believe that you need to be about 70% of your license capacity to get to a healthy point. And then what happens after that is most every tuition dollar falls straight to the bottom line. You've got your teachers covered, your rent is paid, your supplies are in there. Need a little more food, a little more supplies, but not much. And there's your sweet spot, 70 to 90% full. The majority of the people today that filled out the survey are not open right now and collecting no money or less than 20% of what they usually collect. We're hearing that all the way to schools who are charging partial tuition for people who are not attending in exchange for things in the future. There are a lot of very creative models, and I don't think there's any right answer. I think you have to know your market, but I will say, you guys know I'm kind of pushy. I will say that this is not the time to act in fear. What I do not want to happen to you guys is what happened in the 2008, 9, and 10 recession, that owners acted with such fear around their tuition rates and their policies that they damaged themselves for years. I do not want you to be the phone call I get 4 years from now that says, we were scared to raise our rates and we haven't raised in 5 years and our costs are crazy and I can't make it any more help. I want you to be the person that calls me in 5 years and says, we acted bravely and boldly. We made tough choices. We set ourselves up for the future. We have great value in our business and real estate now. Help us exit and make us some money. That's the call we want to get. So once you are 70 to 90% full, the total picture of staff costs mainly costs 50 for most people. Let me say that some of these expense categories are different. If you operate in your home, you could be in a building that's donated like a church or a school or on an employer site. And most people will shift rent money into salary buckets. For most people who have the full spectrum of expenses in a building that they either own and pay a mortgage or rent to themselves or lease from somebody else, have this expense structure. So you could have some differences in your particular structure, but most people at that occupancy will spend 50 to 55% for salaries, benefits, training. There's always other things for staff that come up, but somewhere in that range. Right now, and always, this is your biggest expense. So this is your biggest juggle right now. Hopefully, most of you guys are acting off of PPP money right now in combination with perhaps some of your team is furloughed. And that's a completely different, that's an hour-long webinar. So we're not going to get too deeply into staff strategies. Last week, I had a fabulous webinar with Kathy Ligon from my team, only on staff strategies, and it was an hour and a half. So if that's of interest to you guys, go back and access that from our website. The week before that was Molly from our team, just on marketing strategies and bringing your teams back. So that's going to be outside of the scope of the detail we can share today, but go back and access that if it's of interest. Other operating costs like advertising, vehicles, food, supplies, curriculum, cost most schools 11 to 13%. Facility costs like rent, maintenance, insurance, property taxes, utilities, telephone, cost most schools 20 to 25%. There are always other admin costs, bank fees, office supplies, copiers. Those things are usually 2 to 4%. With the average financially healthy school having a bottom line between 15 and doing incredibly well at 30%. So if you're somewhere in that range, and if you were 70 to 90% full before, you're going to be in much better shape to get back there again. But again, want to give you some strategy. So there's the basic model. Okay, let's talk about the revenue side first. First of all, though, I want to say that our new normal, I want to repeat, our new normal will be more expensive to manage in the short run. No doubt about it. Your PPP money is going to run out in 6 more weeks whenever you got started. You're going to need to start paying your team. Hopefully there's more help coming, but let's not count on it. Let's make a plan. Your cleaning supplies are going to be greater. You can't put as many children in your building in most states. Most states are still operating under a 1 to 10 ratio. I loved it last week when I started talking with people that have hit the wall with that, and they couldn't bring back as many families as wanted to come back because they were stuck at that ratio. So hopefully we start to see that loosen a bit. So at least in the short run, your company's going to be more difficult to run financially, and maybe there will be some forever changes, but that's okay. Well, we can do this. We've got it. So 5 things I want to talk to you about today that I think will make the biggest difference for you. And I'm going in the order of importance and most expensive. So the first thing I want to talk about is where your tuition rates are and what other revenue sources are available. I want to talk to you about your discounting. I have been preaching these 2 things, tuition rates and discounting, for years and years and years and years. Now is the time to make some changes that will make you more financially healthy. We mentioned salaries. I have to put it in there. I'm not going to have tremendous strategies today, like I said, on salaries. Go back and access last week's if that's of interest. I want to talk to you about your rent or mortgage. We're really talking to people about making some short-term strategies, and only about half of you guys on with me today have gotten any concession on your rent or mortgage. So I want to talk about that. And again, more on that next week, a whole session dedicated to that next week with Mike. And then I want to talk about your food expenses. So if you look down your expense categories, discounting, salaries, rent and mortgage, and food are the most expensive things that you do. So let's dig in. First of all, let's talk about tuition rates. And if you've ever been with me before, you know that I am so preachy on you charging the appropriate rate for tuition, a rate that truly reflects the services you're providing and creates a situation where you can take care of your team, take care of your children and families, take care of yourself. I should have put that one first. Take care of yourself first and reinvest in your company. So many people are keeping their tuition rates artificially low, believing that that sets them up for a better situation in their market. I believe it's just the opposite. Less than is less than. If you are as good as, so what it says to me, if you're under your local competition, you are not as good as. If you are less than them in tuition, immediately in my mind, I go to lesser quality. But I know people who are higher quality. I know they're higher quality than the people in their market. And they think they're doing themselves, their families, and their staff a favor by keeping their tuition rates under their competition. You're not doing anyone any favors. First of all, the parent base is thinking less than immediately. They're not as good as, they're not as good as. You're putting that out into the world. The next thing is, how can you have the best staff? How can you invest in your program? How can you invest in yourself? How can you grow? How can you add things if you aren't charging the amount of money it costs you to operate that program? So I get on a big soapbox about this. I was thrilled to see that the majority of you intend to increase your tuition rates this year. I am not going to make judgments on this one. So let me just say that although you just heard my preachiness, and it won't be the last time, I won't make judgments on not increasing your rates this year. I think there are individual circumstances where I might advise people differently. And here's how I would kind of split it up. If you were full and financially healthy before and you always increase your tuition rates, absolutely increase your tuition rates this year. It is going to be more expensive for you to operate. I will help you frame up the letter to announce your tuition rates, because I want you to do a couple of other things in conjunction with that to make even a bigger difference. If you were struggling with enrollment before and you're at market and you really need to gain enrollment, I would advise you differently, but I'm not sure. I think I would like to talk to you and make that decision. I'd like for you to attend Thrive, and I'd like for us to dig in deep with you and really help you make that decision correctly. I'm usually pushy on everybody, high as you can, high as you can. And if you have a waiting list, you aren't charging enough, high as you can. Other strategies: charge incoming families a greater rate. You can always grandfather existing families, call them legacy families. They're very special. You're going to hold their rate for some amount of time. I do know that a lot of providers asked families to continue to pay some percent of their tuition while they were out in exchange for no tuition rate increases for X amount of time, which I think was very creative and brilliant. So good for you. But I want you to think hard about your tuition rates. Get some advice. Could be from us, could be from somebody else, but strongly consider what you're going to do with your tuition rates in the fall. And now is not the time to act in fear. Not the time to act in fear. Be bold. Come on, we got this. The other things I want you to think about, though, beyond just the tuition rate, what else can you do to bring revenue into your school? One of the things I've been really excited about recently is that subsidy schools, and what I mean by that is schools that accept, let's say, more than 30% or any amount of subsidy, have often in the world not been viewed as valuable. Certainly among our buyer base. There are buyers who will buy schools with subsidy. I don't want to say that's a barrier, but it does leave out a lot of people who always saw subsidies as a single payer system and too risky. One thing that has been tremendously positive for us to watch is that those schools are doing better than most everybody else right now because subsidy providers continued to pay. In a lot of places, whether the school was open or not, whether children attended or not, and those schools are doing better than private pay schools. So if you have not accepted subsidy in your school, consider doing it. The main sources of subsidy in the US come from the federal government, although there will be opportunities in your own state. I'm listing the three main ones here from the federal government that have never decreased and have increased consistently for 50 years. The Child Development Block Grant Program, which flows through into your state and will be called something different in every state, is the main source of subsidy money. And it's about 30 years old, and it doubled in size from 2.6 to $5.2 billion 2 years ago, I think. So great source of revenue. Most people believe that if you enroll up to 25 to 30% of your population as subsidy population, and you get on the on the USDA food program, which is typically where you need to be, that pays for all of your food typically for the whole school, not just the subsidy students. So now you have more enrollment, you have that 5-6% of your food covered. It's more administration work, but worth it. And so both of those are interesting to consider. The third one is that Head Start over the last 4 or 5 years has partnered with private providers in providing programs in their schools in varying ways. So get to know your Head Start provider. Head Start money flows through counties to a nonprofit that provides programs in your community, and they often partner with private providers to do a classroom, to mainstream students into your classes. They invest in buildings and playgrounds, and now is the time to get to know that person in your community. So that's an option. We really love public school after school as an option for our private providers. If your local public school has an after school program and they provide it themselves, maybe not much you can do. If they provide it themselves and they're okay with it, I would let them know that you feel like you could do something unique, perhaps an academic program, maybe you do some foreign language, maybe you do something special, and see if they have the interest in you doing it on their site. A lot of people think this will cannibalize their own after-school program. My experience as a provider of both is it strengthens your after-school program. So if they outsource that program to anyone else, the YMCA, the Parks and Rec, Boys and Girls Club, you have the right to bid on that program. You might have to be pushy, but you do. And it's a great source of revenue. So it would be a good thing to try to add one of these ancillary revenue sources during this time. Also, we've seen the increase of grants the last couple of years. Keep your ears open, let your local licensing providers know, licensing support people know that you'd like to know if they hear of something. Let your parents know if their place of work offers any type of grants you would love to be considered. So consider grants. I've heard a lot of people who have staff out being paid by PPP money right now. They don't have they can't engage them all, but they have to pay them. See if someone will volunteer to research and write grants. That's a great one. See if someone would write your summer curriculum. Get them ready for the policies and procedures you need to be writing right now to be prepared for the future. This is not the last time we will deal with something like this. How are you going to deal with it when a teacher's diagnosed with COVID? These things are going to happen. They're going to be part of our life. How are you going to deal with it? So some ideas about increasing your revenue. Let's talk about discounting. I believe that discounting is one of the most hidden issues in childcare centers that there is. And here's what I think the reason is. I think most people are in their school operating and they know what their capacity is by class and for the school. and they know what their enrollment is, and they think about how full they are based on the heads in their building. I'm 90% full. I have 90% FTE. So I have one spot here and I have none here, and I have a waiting list here. What they don't think about is how many of those people are paying them full price or any price. So there are a few tweaks in discounting, and I think it's hidden because most people will discount about 8 to 10% of their revenue. That's a lot. When I'm telling you guys that most schools put 15 to 30% on their bottom line, 8 to 10% is a lot. We are never, I don't think, going to get rid of all discounting, and in any environment, that's not healthy. But I've got a couple of tweaks for you. One in particular, I'd love for you to consider implementing in the fall, along with the tuition rate increase, however you implement. So here are the standard typical industry discounts. The first one is staff children. I don't think you should make a change here unless you're over discounting. Staff are too hard to find, and we need to err right now on the side of caring for our teams. Typical industry standard is free childcare for directors and half-price childcare for teachers. We did see a move the last couple of years for two things. A lot of people are no longer discounting infants and toddlers. That's an easy change you can make. The second one is they're only discounting for 2 children. Now, I'm not making judgments here, and I'm saying think about your particular situation, because we all know what staffing situation we were in before this. We don't know what it's going to look like afterwards. We do know that we have a lot of concerned workers. We have a lot of people who might make a different decision about their work. We also have people who truly believe this will be the time to pick up awesome team members from other companies that don't care for their teams as well. So there are a lot of people that believe this to be a very strong opportunity to gain enrollment and gain team members. Let's hope that they're right. The second one is multiple children in the same family. Sort of an industry standard is 10% discount on the second or less expensive child, perhaps 10% on both. There has been a movement away from this in some centers in the last couple of years. It's a little too new for me to tell you I think you should do it. I think you should know what your competition does. This is a difficult one, but think about it, truly know what and true competition, not just people that operate in your market. If they are not operating to your standards, they are not true competition, and you don't need to consider their policies or tuition rates. Don't want to hear about it. They've got to be as good as you or better than you. And I love it when most of the time people say to me, there is no true competition in my market. Love that. The third one's where I'm going to get preachy. So many years ago, the industry moved away from any days that the child does not attend and does not pay. I know of very few situations where families are allowed to only pay for the days they come. There are still providers that give a week free, 2 weeks free. This one discount probably costs your school about 2% of your revenue. Again, I think you're going to have to move expense categories up in your staff costs. I think it's going to cost you more in cleaning and maintenance supplies. Where are you going to find that? Here's a small tweak that you could begin in conjunction with a fall tuition rate increase, with a great, well-written explanation letter about all the wonderful things you're implementing. We'll raise tuition, as always, to X. And in conjunction with that, we will eliminate freer vacation days. So in the example I showed you, this school they were making about $1.2 million in a 20% bottom line. It was costing them $22,000 a year to allow their 120 families to have a week off. If you allow 2 weeks off, it's costing you $44,000 a year. What could you do with that money? You could have another part-time person. You could have another full-time person if it's 2 weeks. You could have them go into classrooms and support the cleaning. You could have them help check children in at the door and deliver them to their classrooms instead of having parents in and out of your building. So many things. So that is my first tweak. I've been preaching for years. Now is the time to make changes, to get yourself closer to where the market has been. That's an easy one. Some people give discounts to particular industries in their area. Perhaps you are right next to a major hospital and you discount their families. Typical would be 10%. Here's my rule of thumb there. What are you getting for that? If they're just coming to you because they're coming to you, they're going to come to you. Why are you discounting? If that industry, business, hospital, whatever it is promoting you, they're giving your information, they're allowing you to come on their site and do a parenting class, they're distributing your newsletter, then perhaps you're getting 10% value from that. Otherwise, might be something to eliminate. And the last one is some people either are mandated to or choose to discount subsidy families' tuition. In some states, if that payment is less than your market rate, you're not allowed to charge the difference. In some places, people choose not to because other providers choose not to. I think that's an individual decision I can't give a blanket on, but happy to advise people individually. So discounting, little hidden danger, couple of small tweaks makes a big difference. I mentioned again, I have to put a slide in here because it's my number 3. When we spend 50 to 55% in a normal circumstance on staff costs, it's critical that you act quickly, train your team to manage it with you. And this is a every 15-minute a day thing right now, guys. Maybe not during PPP money time. You have to spend it anyway, but don't get in bad habits that cause you difficulties once that money runs out. Hopefully your enrollments, most people believe their enrollments will be much higher at the end of that. I hope so too. But don't get into bad habits that are hard to get out of. Start to train your team how to monitor ratios with you. I know that most people are trying to keep, a lot of people have reduced hours. That's great. They're keeping one teacher intact with a group of children to reduce the amount of exposure. That's great. But set some things in motion. Know what you're going to do when your enrollment bumps up against that. Know what's being required in your state or your community. Have a plan. Have a 1-week plan. Have a 1-month plan. Have a 3-month plan. Have a 6-month plan for your salaries. Okay, a couple of things on real estate strategies. And again, if you have not done one of the things I'm about to say, tune in next week. It's more specific detail, but let me tell you how this is going across the country. If you own your own building and you're paying a mortgage, if you own your own building and it's paid off, we all hate you, but good for you. You did some things really well. If you own your own building and you have a mortgage, most likely your bank is prepared to get the phone call from you that says, I would like to not pay my mortgage for the next 3-4 months. I am a landlord for a national group. I own 3 of their buildings. I got a letter from them that said, we're not going to pay you rent for 4 months. And first of all, I was, dang. And then I thought, good for you. That's exactly what you should be doing. That's what I'm counseling everybody to do. But I just called my bank and they were prepared. They knew already to expect this call. They do not want empty buildings. They do not want to foreclose on your building. They want you to be healthy and they're prepared. Give them a call. Don't be intimidated. Say cash flow is tight. I would like to defer 3 months of my mortgage, or I'd like to pay interest only for 6 months. Be very creative. They're ready for you. It will not be a hard sell. If you rent your building from someone, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and say the same to them. Your landlord does not want an empty building either. He or she wants you to be successful. They want to be part of your solution. Ask for, so we're hearing the average ask is about 4 months of rent deferment, with possibly amortizing that over the remaining term of the lease, or in some cases adding it on to the end of the lease. We've heard people with reduced rent, perhaps reducing it 25% or 50%. I really like the quick hit. I want you guys to preserve as much cash as possible right now. So I would suggest 4, ask for 6, but be happy with 4 because that's kind of the norm. But ask for some rent deferment so that you can preserve your cash right now and put that off till later. So the average company spends 12 to 15% of their income on their rent. Some people less, some people more, depends on where you are, but that's an average. It would help tremendously if you could push that off till later. So obviously the game right now is to preserve as much cash as possible, push off anything you can into the future when you have gained enrollment back and are in a better cash situation. Even if you have cash in your bank account, these are smart strategies. So work on your rent or your mortgage. Okay, here's my next best, my 2 best, discounting and food costs. So most providers provide 2 snacks and a lunch. Some people also do dinner, some people also do breakfast, so there's a lot of combinations. Most people spend 5 to 6% of their revenue on food. There has been a trend, and I will say it's mainly in medium to higher demographic groups, but there has been a trend for 4 or 5 years for parents to bring their own food. And parents enjoy doing this. They like to send their children what they like to eat. They're happy to do it. Providers provide a breakfast snack, an afternoon snack, and drinks. And my tip, idea, recommendation for you guys is to have parents bring their own food. And if you can do it forever. So at least in the short run, I believe that everyone would do this. So let's say for the next 6 months, you can reallocate your cook to other functions, just like we talked about before. You can have that person shift over to classroom support, shift over to cleaning, shift over to whatever it is you need them to do. In addition, it's probably safer, at least in the short run. If you feel like you're in a community that could support this forever, don't say you're doing it in the short run, just do it. We want to make a couple of changes. We need to reallocate some personnel. It will be more expensive to operate. We want to dedicate more resources to cleaning and maintenance and keeping your child safe and communication. And we want to shift that expense and personnel into these other areas. Beginning X, please send a bag lunch with your child. We will provide whatever. So this has been a trend already. Beautiful time to start saving 5 to 6%. So the combination of free days, if you're doing it, and food gets you about 8% of your expenses covered. Those are my best tips for you today, but got a couple more. So a couple more things for you guys to think about. And these are possible small tweaks, but do make a difference in some trends that people have started. The first one is that, and again, I will say that this is generally medium to higher demographic groups, but more and more schools going to auto payment. A lot of people use ProCare's Tuition Express program. A lot of people do automatic draft from other programs, and they make it mandatory. If you have this available, my suggestion for you is to, as you bring families back, again, we want to reallocate our collection admin resources to other functions, and auto payments will be mandatory. Don't stop doing it. You might leave a little window open. If you have a particular problem that this creates for you, please come and talk to me. You don't want a long-term family who doesn't have the ability to do that, to leave your school because of it. But I would suggest not enrolling new families without making it known that it's mandatory. And again, take what I say with a grain of salt. It will not work with every demographic group. But this saves people time, it saves you money, it makes sure it will increase the expenses associated with those drafts, and it will more than offset people in headache time. So now is the time to change that. Go back if you feel like you're not up to date on modern marketing strategies, invest more there. So I know your first instinct, anytime there's a economic down, is to stop spending anywhere you can. And the easiest go-to is marketing strategies. It is not the time to do that because marketing strategies are critical, they're less expensive, and I want you by this coming January, I want you to be stronger than you were this past January. By this September, I want you to be back to where you were before, and by January, I want you to be stronger. And I want you to really, now's the time, give it to somebody to do on your team. You're probably paying them anyway. Find the little marketing brain. He or she is probably 30 or 25, and they know social media, and they can get some training. Listen to Molly's webinar from 2 weeks ago, but now is the time to invest in marketing. So I've told you all the things you should save money on. Don't try to scrimp on your marketing. Spend more if you have to. You need to be rebidding every supply and every service function. I did this for Hinge. So it was a good time to step back, and I printed out all of our expense categories. And I thought, I've been running so fast. It's been years since I've thought about, could we do better with some of our business services that we pay for? Could we find a supplier for our paper good and letterheads and envelopes that's less expensive? You could go with this with your food and your lawn care and I could go on and on and on. Give it to somebody if you have somebody who would be adept at that, and let them make some calls. It will be the time to find someone stronger, hungrier, and less expensive. So now is the time to look at all of your services and supplies. So I know that we have some questions up there, and I will be happy to jump into those. But just to summarize a little bit, I want you guys to think really closely about where you are with your expense structure, with your revenue. I want you to think about one or two things I'd love for you to share in either chat or questions, and let us know what things you think you can take back to your school right now and make a change in. So let me go to the top of questions. Hey, Paul, glad to see you. Paul's been fortunate enough to remain profitable through these times. Good for you. This is a really good question. What's the right amount of reserves to have on hand for a time like this? He means cash. He has about 5 months working towards 6 is a good amount. So really good question. I don't know if this was divine intervention or not, but at our late February shift conference in Miami, I did a session for our attendees on recession planning. And to be honest, I only did it because we were way past when a recession usually kicks in. It's usually just over 4 years we have a recessionary cycle, and we were close to 10. We were in 9 years plus. So it was logical. Of course, no one saw this, but it was logical that something recessionary would happen. Historically, most financial planners will tell you to be able to cover your fixed expenses for 6 months. And let me define that. So Paul, it sounds like you're in good shape, and I hope everyone else is too. So your fixed expenses would be, what would it cost you to operate and live if your business was closed? So what expenses would remain for the closed building? Maybe you're going through that right now because you're closed. Is there rent or a mortgage? You'll have to pay utilities. You'll still have to pay property taxes. You'll have to have insurance. There will be expenses that will remain even if you're closed. The second thing I recommend is for you to include what it costs you to live personally if you're the business owner. You probably have a mortgage at home as well. You need to buy food. Your children need things. You might have a car payment. You need to pay for gas. You need utilities. So figure out what all those things are, and minimum 6 months of cash reserve. I really love that some people surpassed that in the last couple of years because they were doing so well. Some people reinvested in their company and don't have quite that much. That's okay. But in the long run, as you're planning for the future, 6 months of personal and business expenses. Good question. Hello, Alita. Staff cost or salaries only, correct? Not taxes or benefits. When I say, so at the occupancy levels I had, 70 to 90%, and I say 50 to 55%, that includes all staff categories. So at 70%, I generally feel like salaries can be around 45%. At 90%, I think they can be 42%, sometimes less. So when I say 50 to 55%, if you're at a lower occupancy, you probably will spend even more than that. You've got to pay your administrators and your teachers. So I'm talking about in a normalized period. You might be spending 100% right now or more. So in a normalized period, 42 to 45 just on salaries, 50 to 55 with salaries, benefits, payroll taxes, and other things you pay for your staff. Thank you for that. Hello, Tom. We have no choice but to raise tuition due to the increased minimum wage of $1 per hour. Yeah, unfortunately, that'll be interesting to watch, right? I guess nobody's really going to retract that. Historically, because I've been through in my 33 years now, many minimum wage increases over time. And what I found historically is that raising tuition rates because of minimum wage increases is usually easily acceptable by families. They expect it, they know what's happening, they're likely getting a raise themselves, whether they're at minimum wage or above. It typically pushes everyone up slightly. And so I have found that to be the case. What you might do, Tom, if you have to do that anyway, is break down a larger increase. So if you're going to have to go up 3% to deal with a minimum wage increase, maybe you go up 5% and you break it down for people. Here's why we're doing 3%. Here's why we're doing 2%, more expensive to operate. We're implementing all these wonderful new things. And by the way, no more free days. Or, we want you to start bringing your food. So, or all of that. I mean, it's a crazy time, guys. It's time to be bold and do crazy things. Okay, Nadia, hello. Should we communicate that legacy families have their rates grandfathered in so new parents don't think we targeted them and were treated unfairly? I get this a lot, and I'm always surprised by the question, but why shouldn't you give something great to your legacy families? It makes perfect sense to me. They've been loyal customers for a very long time. I know that as I go places I shop, I often get discounts or coupons or to reward people who have been with you for a long time. I think is perfectly fine. And especially in this environment, for you to be able to say, yes, we did give them something special. They stuck with us through a very difficult time, and we're grateful, and they are grandfathered in. Perhaps if they're grandfathered in, as you raise, as their children age up, and possibly the rate generally goes down. You don't go down till they catch up, so you don't raise them, but maybe get them caught up at some point. So I'm not saying to do it forever. But I don't usually think that's a problem. I don't think I would have a problem explaining that if someone came to me with it. Can you please discuss contract writing strategies with force majeure clause to protect our business in a later webinar related to some other epidemic situations which may arise? Had some parents withdraw immediately and demand a refund of the tuition paid for the month as well as deposit. Sure, I would have to do more research on that. We do, of course, have Alec, who is our in-house attorney, and I will throw that one at him and see what he comes up with, and happy to report back. Again, thank you for that suggestion. USDA food program means we have to provide, thank you for saying this, I should have disclaimed this one. If you are on the USDA food program, you are required to provide the food for the children. So, and we want all children in the same situation. That makes sense to me. If you're on the USDA food program, I don't think you would want to make it mandatory for other families to bring their food. I think that would unfairly single out children. And I meant to say that actually, that if you're getting paid to provide food, it's the same thing as families being food. What I want you to do is not have the expense. So if you're on the USDA food program, you already don't have the expense. But thank you for pointing that out. If both partners are not receiving income, although they are working full-time, is this a time to begin a salary? So assuming you mean business partners not receiving income, they're working full-time, time to begin a salary. I think that's probably an accountant question. I would ask your tax advisor, and it's going to be dependent on your particular situation. So whether you pay yourself in draws from the company, if there's some money there, or you pay salaries, I think is more of a tax question than an operations question. Good one though. Could be. We'd love for you to let us know what you find out. You're welcome, Paul. Our tuition has increased at this time as a pandemic center by 15%. Okay, should we keep that? Should we change that? We did not charge our regular families the increased tuition because they are not here. Fantastic. I love that. That's wonderful. So you guys stayed open for essential workers and increased your rates because of that 15%. You are the first people I have heard who have done that, and I'm so proud of you. And I think that's fantastic, and I can't wait to pass that along. Maybe too late for some people, but that's terrific. Should you change it? I probably wouldn't change it in the short run. I think you need to wait and make that decision. At the moment, perhaps you reduce it some in the future, maybe 5%, maybe 7%. I'm just making up stuff, but your cost, it's going to be a while before your cost structure is going to change. Even if your state opens up or your regular families come back, your expenses are still going to be there. So perhaps other people should consider that. When you reopen or open broadly, go ahead and increase your tuition rates because of the cost structure you have. And perhaps instead of having a rate increase later, you just reduce it some, but not the whole, whatever it is, 15%. But that's fantastic. Thank you for that. All I do is talk to people all day and share their brilliant ideas. So thank you for that. A couple more questions. Let's see how we're doing on time. We're a little bit over, but no problem. I want to get as many as I can. Our executive board voted last night to close for a year of restructuring our program. We have been a model of sliding fee tuition for low-income immigrant families in the city that they're in. The program had no tuition coming in. Now I'm closing the nonprofit center, but want to start restructuring with a mission of supporting low-income families. What is one or two topics to explore first to reopen in a year? Well, I love the sliding scale model. I would seriously look at alternative tuition resources for those families where they could gain part or all of their tuition from another source and then pay you the difference, which should be less probably than they're paying now. If they don't qualify, because I'm not completely up to speed on immigration requirements for subsidies, and it's probably different in different places. I would look for grants or donations that might offset those. So I think what you have to do is look for other revenue sources. Your expenses won't decrease, but if you can find the revenue sources to offset that. So my first places would be Child Development Block Grant Program, tuition resources in your state, perhaps Head Start, perhaps some grants. Let us know how that goes, and good luck. Emma, thoughts on refunding prepaid tuition to families that paid for the year up front? We closed mid-March. We have offered to refund credit or gladly accepted as funds that help support while we are closed. Our understanding was that we are legally obligated to refund. I've had that question. I'm not actually sure that I know what your legal obligations are. I will tell you some models that we've seen. We have seen usually things like most everyone who had people prepay monthly or annually, if they closed the middle of March, if they were open, then typically people just continued to pay, at least for March. If they closed, a lot of people had people pay the 2 weeks in March, and then a combination of things that they got a choice for. They could disenroll and take a chance on getting a spot again. They could pay half in exchange for something like no tuition rate increase for a year or two, or they could pay their full rate in exchange for, knowing their place would be there and no tuition rate increase and maybe a free week at Christmas. So I'm, throwing out ideas, but there's a lot of creativity around that. I certainly would find out whether you're legally obligated. If they request it, I will make a guess that you probably are. However, you don't have to guarantee them a spot when you reopen. And I don't know what your situation is, so I don't know if you were full enough to make that work or if they know they can just re-enroll. So it's a different situation either way. But let us know what you find out. So let me look up at our chat real quick. And I know that Carrie has been monitoring. Likely she's already answered. I'll just run through a couple of these real quickly. Hello, Roberto. How can they be at 60 or 70% enrollment given the group size limitations imposed by almost all of the states? All states do not have that. So one of the states I was discussing does not have it. The other ones are, I'm not sure I can answer that unless their classrooms are smaller and they have one group size in classrooms already. So most schools would have 2 group sizes per classroom, but in certain buildings, it's very likely that they have 1 group size. I have a friend who's a provider who has 6 infant rooms, each with 4 babies. So each room could be open, where you might not be able to do that in some other situations. So yes, I do think the screen froze for a minute. Sorry about that. Thank you, Carrie. I will, hi, Elke. We are happy to share our financial model. Send us an email. We'll send it over to you. Remember that it is a model built on normal times, and you will get updates from us, but it's what we want to be shooting for, right? So it's where we want to be or better when this is over. Rate increase letter to parents, happy to, what we will start to work on in advance of Thrive. If someone needs it before fall, let us know, but I think we can frame up something that you can kind of pick and choose from. They do auto drafts, but keep a credit card on file in case the tuition declines. Great idea, thank you. How does auto payment save us? Are there costs? There are costs, and it saves you much more money than it costs you in time and chasing down payments and having things bounce and credit cards being declined. It's just a push of the button, and in my opinion, completely worth the cost. A lot of our parents or teachers will not be returning till August or later. They do want to save their spot. What's a good deposit amount? Usually do half of the tuition. We still like half of the tuition. I will tell you a very creative idea that some of our clients are trying a more academic summer than a camp summer because they believe that families are concerned about what their children missed, and they see teachers who have not worked the last couple of months as a beautiful opportunity to hire for the summer to do some special activities with the children. So maybe you can get some of those teachers back to come in part-time, and maybe they pay half. I would be creative, but if you're full and they may not have a spot, then I would charge half like you always do. Why not? You're still there, so why would you do anything different? How to get staff to work and not commit unemployment fraud by receiving unemployment when work is offered and center is open, but they make more on unemployment than, I guess you mean PPA, or maybe that's something else, unemployment. Yeah, tough one. If they make more money on unemployment than working for you, then a couple of things, I hope you're in a state that is paying hazard pay. Consider giving them a bonus when they work. Give them something to do that is, of course, if you offer them work back and they refuse it, they no longer qualify for unemployment. So get some information about that. And there are providers who are having to bump up against that. So in some cases, people are trying, of course, to work really hard with those team members that don't feel comfortable coming back. Obviously, they don't want team members coming back if they have a health issue. So you might have to find out more about that, perhaps have them do something different, like we said, perhaps search for grants, write curriculum, things they can do outside of the center, develop training programs, whatever. Jewel, also will refer you back to, I don't know if you were with us last week, but Kathy Petchel has some great ideas on staff strategies on that webinar. So suggest going back and looking at that. Fantastic set of questions. Well, a couple more. Is there a disclaimer in the contract that tuition is due even if closed? Would we still be obligated to pay the tuition back? We don't know what your contract says, so that's a good question. Look at your contract. My guess is if you're closed, you probably, unless you make some arrangement with them, you probably pay their tuition back. I would do it anyway as a course of goodwill, whether you're legally obligated or not. There are some great procedures and policies on the best operate right now, and I want you to look back at the last two webinars because they address that in good detail. Elke, we're happy to give you more information. At what point do you recommend reconfiguring P&Ls to reflect the reduced group size reality since we don't have an end date? I think today, to be honest, it would be so hard for me to create a budget for somebody. I think today you need to implement the best income strategies and expense reducing strategies you can and do the best you can to preserve cash on a daily basis. I'm not sure that I would need to see a forever change, which, in accounting world will take 6 to 12 months for me to see a change consistently to believe that it might be here to stay. So I think we've all got 6 months to work our way through this on a moment by moment basis. One of the things I find about childcare owners is they think they're freaked out when they start talking money and cost control, when the truth is they're masters in their head and they are so much better than they even ever realize. They manage their staff costs well. They know intuitively when they need people and when they don't. And the picture's going to look drastically different right now than it does when your PPP money runs out. So be creative about how you use that money right now. And I'm assuming everybody got it. The national groups did not. They don't qualify. So, it might be more difficult for them right now. But most everybody did. But be prepared on a moment by moment basis to make very fast changes. You're going to make some mistakes. I've already made some. We're going to do it. It's okay. We're just making the best decision we can at that moment. Own it, fix it, move on, all good. Last one, we have a fee structure only based on number of days in attendance and not based on age. Do you suggest we change that? Absolutely, absolutely. I'd like to know what your competition does, but I would like for you to charge full tuition every week, whether they attend or not. I'd like to know more about whether they're private pay or subsidy or what your competition does, but I will say it's very rare to do that. Your expenses continue every single day, whether they're there or not. You can't put another child in there. I say to people, it's like renting an apartment. You rent an apartment and you go on vacation for a week. Do you still have to pay your rent? Are they going to move somebody else in there? No, they can't do any of that. The apartment's there. It's available for your use. The expenses go on, and it just should be paid. So fantastic questions. I know I have a few more. I'm so sorry. The budget spreadsheet, yes, send us an email, please, and we'd be happy to send you my silent business partner. We can answer questions about it. Like I said, consider joining us in registration opens Friday for our August Thrive event. I think it costs $379. We'll coach you in advance, get the live day event, Q&A, group case studies. We're really excited to do it in a web-based format. It costs, generally would cost you $1,500 to $2,000 to fly somewhere, stay in a hotel, pay for it, food. So we wanted to reach more people faster this year, and we really like for you to join. Next week, a more in-depth look at real estate strategies. Mike Pepper from our team will join me for that content. Next Tuesday at 1. The following week, I'm going to do a webinar on changing buyer and seller strategies. We're starting to hear from our buyers of the world, real estate buyers and business buyers, how they will look at our business, how they might make changes in their processes, how their valuations might change, and we want to share that with you. And then, like I said, we're working on a grand finale, and hopefully I can pull that off before I tell you about it. Thank you for joining us today. I wish everyone peace and health and prosperity. Please reach out to the team if we can support in any way. Act boldly. Now's the time to be brave. Bye, friends.